And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. And it's great to have Dr. David Cartland back with us again. It's been a while. We were messaging each other recently, so it was about time to have him on. David, thank you so much for your time as always.
No, thank you for having me. You don't look like you've aged a bit, to be fair. Whereas, as you can see from me, what recent events have done to me and my complexion.
So I want to get onto your book and a number of the headlines. Actually, hold up your book, and then I'll bring it up later so we can just mention that. Do no harm. Diaries of a Vaccinated Antivaxer. There it
Yeah.
is. The links are in the description. It's just out. Probably like a week ago, I think, or so, 10 days ago. We'll get onto that. But let me ask you, you mentioned everything that you've been in the middle of, because you have been attacked because you've been, I think, probably one of the most outspoken doctors in the UK. That's come with a cost. Where kind of are you in terms of being pursued and harassed? And I'll say those words. You don't need to say them, but what is it like at the moment?
Well, have we got 2 hours or three? I'm joking. I mean, it's been to summarize. Look, I kept in my lane. You've interviewed me a few times now. I tried to stick to the basics of, why are we giving this to children, pregnant women, masks and lockdowns and vaccine injuries. Kept it very safe, as well as the odd ethical issues around the vaccine rollout. And for that, it was a 3-year pursuit by the GMC in the end. And I think the FOI that I did was about 254 complaints came in about me, mainly from doctors, anonymous doctors as well. But the crux of it was, so I got put through a kangaroo court. The best way to describe it, a hatchet job is another way. I wasn't allowed witnesses. I wasn't allowed witness statement to be used. I gave them a massive number of appendixes where I tried to show the mitigations in the fact I'd been harassed and trolled and abused and stalked, and didn't want to allow that in either. Direct comparisons to other doctors who've been let off for things that are, criminal things. We've seen 2 doctors recently let off for, leaving a patient on the bed and having intercourse with the nurse, popping back in with the patient, and they let off. Another doctor castrating women, let off. Dave Cartland got struck off for the grand total of 5 things that they managed to stretch into 17. But in a nutshell, it was harassment of doctors, which was me calling out 3 doctors, spun beautifully into a narrative of Cartland's a bully. The other side of the argument was completely ignored. The fact that these doctors actually gave way more than they got, way more. I gave 5 vaccine exemptions out, which they called falsification of medical notes for money, which in real terms was 5 letters of support for people needing to travel to see dying relatives. And they came to me. It wasn't advertised, it wasn't charged. They were always pro bono. And they trapped me through getting a patient to book in with me to get one of these exemptions, which they called falsifying medical notes, which is a criminal offence. And I don't see any police around here, like I say, but they found me guilty of that. And I called out a local practice manager for throwing my application in the dustbin, despite me having a couple of degrees and a master's, and discriminating against me. She called me a rabid anti-vaxxer. So I took offence and I called her out, and she turned that into Cartland's harassing me. So long and short of it, they brought in the big guns, the head of the CPS London and a homicide barrister over 6 weeks, and lots of money spent. I just sat there in silence listening, and second half I didn't go back to because it was that one-sided and unfair that I just took my punishment, which I thought would be a suspension, maybe a slap on the wrists, some rehabilitation in my online spats with people, but no, strike off. They called me what did they say? They said I was a danger to the public, that I brought the profession into disrepute. Good job I can smile about it. And then also, what was the other one? Negatively affecting the public confidence in the profession. Sweet irony, and that's it. So that was in June, July. I've been struck off and demonised in the press. The BBC and all the other tabloids had a crack at reputational damage. So I thought, I took a few months out, licking my wounds, Peter, and honestly, it did affect me massively. Still does, but I've decided to combat this with cathartic poetry, writing the book, tell the story, and a number of other projects that I'm getting involved in, just to sort of reinvent myself. Sod it is what I've said to them, really. And my barrister actually said, "Don't get mad, get even," and I'm going to live by that, I think.
Absolutely. Well, let's bring that is there's the book once again, Do No Harm, and it kind of tells your story. I love Diaries of a Vaccinated anti-vaxxer, and you get the confused narrative that the media try and draw. And I know this goes into your background, and then in the medical field. But tell us a little again, going through it all, because some people may say, just forget about it. That was in the past, but yet you realize that, and we'll touch on some of the stories that there's been very little justice for the litany of failures in terms of the jab rollout. But what was it like for you? I think going back on your story and putting this together, you kind of have to relive the whirlwind, the storm that you've been through. But tell us about, yeah, putting the book together.
I think that was it. I kind of, like I said, licked my wounds, had a few weeks of feeling sorry for myself. And I thought, what's the best way to get my side of the story out? Because through the tribunal itself, all context was removed. My side of an argument, I would say something in retaliation, but actually that was put out that I was a perpetrator of said comment rather than just responding. So it tells the story of why I became a doctor, takes you right back to the beginning of my early life, the med school interview that I sat through, some of the reasons, some of the responses I gave to the interview questions, and some of my early career. I talked through some anecdotes of why I feel that doctors were able to be hoodwinked in this way with the COVID era, and then took the reader through the actual COVID era, and basically, having been vaccinated myself, how I'd come to the realization of, this is not good. And it was mainly through seeing vaccine injured people day in, day out was the crux of the matter. And so, yeah, it's a bit of a sort of step by step through. I've written it in a sort of gentle narrative way, and the target audience in mind, really, that it's not only for the awake community that know my story and want to sort of read my legacy, as it were, but also for people to send to their, vaccinated relatives that are starting to awaken or queuing up for their booster. So I think it's equally applicable for them in terms of its content. Very gentle. I stay away from any, quote, conspiracy theories, unquote, and just keep it very much my story. And the response has been good. It's doing okay, much to the disgust of the trolls, much to the disgust of the pharmaceutical industry. It's hit number one on a number of what the trolls call niche categories, but actually really good categories: general practice and nursing, medical reference. What's the other one? Scientific biographies. So doing okay.
But it's interesting because I think a lot of us, people's general travels into working in the medical field. Again, I think the UK are so different from the US. The US does seem to be very much money oriented. You can make a lot of money as a doctor in the US, and that seems to be a career progression, a profession you get into, and it can be lucrative. In the UK, it's very different. It seems to be, and I've talked to many people involved in the health industry, and it seems so people do it in the UK because they actually want to help people. I'm sure there are Americans that also, but there seems to be that. Is that a fair enough assessment? People, I guess, get in naively, not knowing the games that are being played or the power of some of these big pharma companies. And yeah, tell us about that. And I think how long until you learn the influence these companies have.
I think I agree actually with what you say in terms of American system is very money orientated. I think it's fair to say, part of the reason you would become a doctor in America is to get rich. Certainly one of the motivations for me was not to get rich. Summed up by junior doctor hours, I tell the story actually in the book, the many, many hours of unpaid labor that I put in, to stick around. You'd have egocentric consultants starting their ward around at 5 o'clock, which was your finishing time. And then you'd be given a list of jobs that you could either leave till tomorrow, or you can get cracking and do them into the evening, and then the relatives would turn up. And, I can either leave them to it and not know what's going on with their relatives, or I could sit on the bedside and tell them. And that's the sort of doctor I kind of came to be, really. And yeah, you do it as again, talk about it in the book. Why did I become a doctor? It wasn't for the riches. It was, you make a lifelong commitment. You have to gear everything you do, from your GCSEs, you have to straight A them. You have to select your A levels according to scientific subjects, and then you get into med school, and then you follow the flock. But I think, yeah, you asked about kind of when do you realise that Big Pharma's got its tentacles into the whole thing. The degree is called medicine, so it's the clues in the title. Really, it teaches you to give out medicine. and when I look at some of the sort of things that I've learned since my rude awakening, that You're not taught anything. I mean, I think about vaccines and immunology. Bearing in mind my first degree was in sort of into that. It taught me about the immune system and infectious disease, etc. But you're basically warned, and I talk about the comparison between the two degrees, which demonstrates it really nicely that the first degree teaches you critical thinking, always look for conflicts of interest. Some published papers conclude things that are just not in the body of the text. And then you find out they're sponsored by GSK or Pfizer. Surprise, surprise. But yeah, in medicine, I called it indoctrination center, med school. You do get indoctrinated. I remember once being warned. I think I'd asked a question in a lecture about vaccines, childhood vaccines, and being told, be careful, because you will be Wakefielded. Well, I think I've been Wakefielded, but with steroids applied in this new era of computer online harassment and abuse. But yeah, so yeah, I think they positively select people into med school now. I think that's one of the points I make in the book, that people who've obviously passed their A stars in everything, and you learn from a textbook. And then the whole medical curriculum does take you through kind of, these are the guidelines, these are the rules. You give that drug for this in this circumstance, and you give that drug in the other. And if you get a side effect, we'll give you another drug. And there's an absolute absence, that's the last thing I'll say, in nutritional teaching. So you're not taught anything about what the actual healthy diet is, other than what the British Heart Foundation will mislead you for it to be. And yeah, there's easy pickings. The doctors really keep them busy all day. 40 patients a day, exhausted. Tell them repeatedly it's safe and effective, and all the military grade SARPs that everyone else had to contend with. And you've got a perfect storm for what I call ostrich syndrome. That was a real pandemic.
No, exactly. The even on the back of the book, you've two quotes mentioning mRNA, the utter devastation that it can cause, and now beginning to see that. And even one of them is Robert Malone talking about have kind of the link with AIDS. And I mean, tell us about as a doctor, how you saw the push towards using a new novel technology instead of using a tried and tested approach. And I say that with inverted commas. That's another separate conversation. But basically using the population worldwide as guinea pigs to test this. What were thinking back, the conversations before we get on to some of the latest stories, but the conversations kind of you had, or maybe you don't have those conversations, you just are given a product as a doctor in the GP practice in the hospital, and you just administer that, and there are no questions asked. I don't know. Tell me, kind of put the viewers and listeners in that situation, what it was like.
Well, yeah, it came out of the blue, this technology, and it's only retrospectively that I realized that it was novel myself, even when I received it. You're not told by the person pressing the plunger that this, and I've had conversations in 2025, people still don't consider this to be even a novel technology, let alone the nuts and bolts that it's mRNA based in most of them, and adenoviral vector in the AstraZeneca et al. So yeah, it just, good question about, what was wrong with the conventional vaccines. I think if you say the principle, let's introduce a small amount of a foreign substance into a body to train an immune response, nobody would see that as an unusual concept. It's just, and I know we're going to talk about this later, it's the added extras in the vial that we know absolutely nothing about in the conventional vaccine. But then they brought out from nowhere this mRNA technology, which, it just sounds like gene therapy. And the reason it sounds like gene therapy is it is gene therapy, except there's nothing very therapeutic about it, as we've seen. And you see that the devastating effects. And I always think back to one of the interviews that I got banned from, I think, pretty much every social media platform at the time, where I'm holding up the documents from a sex submission from, I think it was Moderna and Pfizer's own documentation, going to the trouble of holding the documents up on camera and reading them out ad verbatim. And it said something to the effect of, these are not conventional vaccines. They are immunomodulatory gene therapies that will never be used on humans due to, quality control, regulatory issues. And this was some 6 months before the rollout, saying in their documentation, we will never use these. And then I put lots of references to the things I was discussing. That was marked up by social media. Again, therein lies the problem. I'm trying to spread this message that this is a novel therapeutic, inverted commas, and you're labelled as a. I think the ruling from the social media companies where you're breaching the community guidance on spreading dangerous misinformation. To this day, I'm banned on LinkedIn, where I had good traction. How are you supposed to have scientific discourse when one side of the debate is stifled somewhat? And they've made a good job of, all the doctors that have spoken out have been dealt with. Many doctors every day contact me every day, and I mean every day, on social media, saying how I'm brave. I wish I could do it, Dave. You've done really, really well. What's stopping you? And apart from their own careers, and they've got kids and they've got financial commitments, it's the fact that we've seen what they've done to you, Dave. We don't want any of that. And that's, it's been perfectly prohibitive. And that's where we are now. So yeah, it's been a strange few years, but yeah, the technology itself, it's catastrophic when you think about its mode of action. You're introducing some genetic material, whether it's through a vector or through mRNA transfection, and you're turning your human cell into an antigen factory with no known off switch. We're seeing biodistribution data that tells you it's distinctly not staying in your arm for 2 hours, and Pfizer knew that from their animal studies. So where did that claim come from? You've got doctors saying it's safe in pregnancy. Pregnant women were not tested upon. It's safe in children. Again, JCVI said it shouldn't have been given to children, but it was overruled somehow. So all these claims are coming out. And this is where my, quote, harassment, unquote, came from. I called them out. So you're saying it's 100% safe in long-term in pregnancy. Well, where's your evidence? And that even got twisted. I wrote an email to the victim, in inverted commas, just to say, I'm going to report you to the GMC for misinformation. That was reported by the GMC that Dr. Cartland threatened retaliatory action to a female colleague, twisting it every single turn. And so they created this wonderful narrative that, obviously, if you Google me now, you see that I'm a devil.
I attest that you're actually a fairly decent guy. That's what I find. So just to go against that narrative, um, people getting the book. I mean, it's only, well, I think it's $8.99. You can get paperback. You can get an ebook for like a $5 or something, which is, I see people sometimes bring out books like 20-25 quid. I think, seriously. But for people going, and again, the link is in the description. Click on and just get it from Amazon. What do you want people to go away with when they get hold of the book for Christmas, or get hold of it now and have a read of it? As it's just under 200 pages, so it won't take you very long to go through it. Is it your personal story? Is it some of the struggles you had? Are there particular parts that you thought, actually, I really want to leave this with the reader? Yeah, just give us maybe one or two of those key points that you want to leave with someone when they put down the book.
Yeah, firstly, the price point. I wanted it to be cheap so everyone can have a copy. Simple as that. As cheap as you can. You don't get rich from making books. It was never to make money. It was to enlighten those groups that I mentioned, the slowly awakening, those who aren't awake, and for those who are fans, or people who followed me for the time, just to get the story, the legacy. I made it short because I don't like reading long books, and we live in an era where people want sound bites now. So sitting with a big 3-inch book, people don't want that anymore. So I've kept it brief. I've kept this chapter short, so you can do it in bits if you need to. People have got back to me and said they can't put it down, which is great. It's good feedback. So yeah, it's emotional. It's people say, again, I wrote it in 3 days flat, and the intention was just to get it all down on paper in some sort of. It started as therapy. Then the publisher was interested, and then we went with that. And it's my story from, as I said, from medical school. Literally one chapter is the medical school. Why did I become a doctor? I've called it. Gone through the early career just to sort of paint a picture of some of the egos in medicine, some of the narcissists, some of the bullies, even in the senior echelons of the medical hierarchy, and how that feeds into how they were perfectly positioned for what came in the last 5 or 6 years, a scamdemic, as I call it. And then I wanted to kind of leave with the other side of the story. And it actually, what led me to the GMC chapters was, I don't know if I can name him, but there's a doctor who posted about me saying Cartland's legacy to his children will be his Google search. And that really hurt me. And I kind of thought, I'm going to tell my story in a couple of short chapters, but when my grandkids and great grandkids read it, they'll read that Dave wasn't allowed any witnesses. His witness statements were completely doctored. They look like a Pfizer document with all the black lines on it. All of my analysis of the fact that I was victim, not perpetrator, not allowed. The doctor called me this, that, and the other, but Dave Cartland retaliated with that. But that's all they framed. They framed Dave Cartland said this, doesn't matter about the context. So it kind of gives that flavour of how every decision went against me, and it is a farce. And it was just an absolute kangaroo court conducted by the big guns, as I mentioned. They brought in the head of the CPS London and a homicide barrister to take down a little Cornish GP with a few followers on Twitter. And it was hard to watch, and it impacted me massively. And I touch on some of the impact it had on me, in terms of my mental health. And I chose this career because I care and geared my entire life to it. I'm now 25. No, I'm not really. I'm 43, and and I've got another 25 years left to give, even within the system. If I could manage to sort of find a way to navigate that, working with people who are, COVID cultists, as I call them, still giving the jab today, but I'll find a new way. It's like I say, it's forced my hand really into a different sort of medicine. And I know you can't see off the camera here. There's a pile of books from, all the naturopaths. There's Barbara O'Neill, Sarah Myhill, all the heroes, and just reading through and sort of informally training. So that when you do get an appointment with me through my health coaching, that you're going to get a blend of allopathic and naturopathic and mainly holistic, as in I'm considering every aspect of this illness, disease, symptom on your life, from its biological, social and psychological impact, which is what a doctor should be doing, but just never has enough time to do in 10 minutes. Recently had a stint back in GP before I was branded a danger to the public for 6-7 weeks in St Austell in Cornwall. Absolutely loving it. People were recognising me, the doctors and staff. They were all coming up to me, shaking my hand, giving me a hug, asking for advice about how to treat vaccine injury, making sure the door was locked and they weren't seen with the heathen Dr. Cartland. But it was amazing. Then suddenly, like the tribunal started, and then they received an anonymous phone call. It's funny, and tipping them off about what an evil man they had working, and I was let go. Not by conversation again. It was an email, and we don't want the controversy. We don't want the attention on the surgery of your presence here. So that was how it ended. So the medical profession has got some good eggs, but what I didn't notice from my early career is that, you cross them and you'll be ended one way or another. And it's not that they've left it at my career. They've left it. They've gone for, we talked off camera before about other facets of my life. So the strike off, they've got my career, they've got the pound of flesh, jog on and leave me alone now. But it's not stopped there. It's my refereeing at the weekend. I love to do youth football. They're looking to put a stop to that. They've contacted various members of my family, friends, neighbours. When I say they, I don't even know who they are. Tried to go to the police, only to find that the police had been receiving reports about me in their dozens. Even social workers and child care, Cornwall's Child Services had received anonymous tip-off. So this is orchestrated by somebody. Don't know who. Don't really want to know who. I just want to be left alone now. I'm a family man. Got kids. Got a lot of dogs to look after. I just want to be moving on in my career now and see what that looks like. But just leave me alone if anyone's watching.
Let's put some of the stories, obviously, vindicate you and vindicate many people who stood up. That does not heal what has happened and the damage they've tried to cause. And of course, to have an appointment with you, drdavidcartland.com. Again, the link is there in the description. And I think people are, the last thing they want to do is go near a GP surgery or ever talk to a doctor, because there's mistrust, probably more than politicians actually, or doctors. So that is there, drdavidcartland.com. You can go and get hear and talk to David, a doctor that you can trust and where he is coming from. So that is there. But could I just take one or two of the stories as we record this just a few hours before it goes out on Monday the 17th, and it was Saturday the 15th, a Daily Telegraph headline. Now, you've posted this, of course, on your X feed, and make sure people are following you so they can get some of this information, what you're keeping an eye on. But the headline was, "Government withholding data that may link COVID jab to excess deaths." They had argued that releasing figures could lead to distress or anger of bereaved relatives if connection were discovered. Nothing about anger against the authorities that actually cover this. This There seems to be a move now, maybe too little, too late, I don't know, but certainly the Telegraph and the Mail as well, a an openness and a desire me to begin to talk about this, which is curious, and I'm wondering where that's coming from. How, when you read these articles, of course, you say, "Well, I was telling you this years ago," but how do you see this drip, drip feed of information that is now coming out, and will anyone actually be held accountable?
I think it was the only way, really, again, without sounding conspiratorial, all the reading around what's happened in the last 5 years, what the end goal is, what this was all about in the first place. There's a script to be followed here. And again, I'll try and stay away from that for the purposes of the answer. But one of them was, this has become undisputable now. I've put a post out today, like a poll on my social media. Does anyone know anyone vaccine injured? Please comment on your individual experiences. And honestly, people are quoting double figures around their family. I've just asked for family, direct friends and colleagues, and I've just had a quick look before we came on camera, and it's just absolutely ridiculous, people's anecdotes. But people know now. I think even the hardened pro-vaxxers know their own health has been affected detrimentally. They're attending funerals incessantly. I mean, I only take my daughter to ballet on the Saturday. We do ambulance watch now. I'm getting to her early, and I think we counted 6. It's only a 25-minute journey, and we counted 6. The record is, I think, 11 3 weeks ago. It must be booster season, is all I say. But yeah, that's where I'm at, really. I mean, how this isn't headlines, this is on every media outlet. That how do you tell somebody something without saying it? You publish headlines like that, alarm and distress? Damn right, alarm and distress. Damn right. And obviously they're telling the world now that they can't release that data because there'll be absolute pandemonium. There will be uproar. And there'll be pitchforks at dawn. They will. And they've got to be really careful that this is done in the right way. Now, I know every single doctor knows what's going on. There's no excuses now. Every single doctor, and I've seen it. Even the kind of more senior partners at practices I was at just before the strike off, they know. You can see it in their eyes if they don't even say it. They know now. And headlines like that, I've shared it around, and it's quite funny because all the people on my side, we were interacting. I've sent it to every doctor in my phone book, and you get the 2 ticks to see they've read it. And I think every told you so one now, they can probably almost hear me saying it as I say it, send it to them. But my pronouns on Twitter are told you so. I've changed them just for the next few months. But you've got to keep a sense of humor in these times.
I think some of the anger from our side is we had a whitewash of a COVID inquiry, which didn't show anything. This drip drip is now coming out in the media, yet the media aren't going after that COVID inquiry. The media, they're talking about this, but there's no headlines, COVID inquiry, whitewash, refuse to look at this, or anything like that. And it's in maybe the media are only allowed to go so far, the legacy media. Maybe they've been given permission to talk about certain areas because, again, there's editorial control on all of this. It's not just a journalist writing a good story of something they find. No, you have to go through the higher echelons of the paper. But yeah, what are your thoughts on, I think, the media not really going after the utter cover up? There was a cover up, and then there was a cover up on top of that. There was the COVID tyranny, and then there was a supposed inquiry that didn't give anything. And yeah, how do you kind of expose that continual cover up?
Well, like you say, you've got to follow the money for starters. There is this script that needs to be followed. Controlled release, drip, 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 not like avalanches like Dave Cartland's letting go. It's quite funny because recently I've trolled all the mainstream media outlets by emailing them and telling them I'd be free to give my version of events with the GMC, my experience, mention my book briefly, all the radio stations, all the legacy media, mainstream media, the rags, the tabloids, and I've had no responses. I did the same about 6 months ago as well with the local GP surgeries, offering a half an hour free seminar delivered by me about how to detox people who have been harmed by the vaccine, or at least try to. No answer. So you've got exactly your answer there. The heads are in the sand. I think everyone kind of wants to move on from it now. I'm getting the gist that even kind of the awake folk, for want of a better phrase, just want to move on from it. But I won't be moving on from it at all. But yeah, to go back to your point about the media, it's just disgusting, isn't it? The way they came after the unvaccinated, the absolute disgraceful way they spoke about people who chose to exercise their right to bodily autonomy. And then you discover not only the whitewash, but every day there's another. I know we're going to talk about another case of a doctor with transverse myelitis, but every day there's a case now. So these rarities aren't rare because they keep happening, and these coincidences aren't coincidences because, again, they keep happening, but reported as so. And again, you always see in the headlines that, thanks to the life-saving effect of the COVID-19 vaccine, saving billions and trillions, quadrillions of lives. However, we do report on this one particular. You see that even in the scientific press. You always see that line. I always go looking through the paper for it now. There's always that prefix of, thanks for the life-saving mRNA platform. However, we're going to present the fact that it causes shed loads of clots and myocarditis. It's almost like a condition of getting it published, because all of the published peer-reviewed stuff, it never gets to peer-reviewed because peer-reviewed is corrupt, for starters. But, a lot of the things I quote are preprints or, things that have been retracted. And the reason they've been retracted and not made it past preprint is they've got truth bombs within, and they've got no conflict of interest. They're just merely reporting data. And that's not allowed, unfortunately, because there's a big industry here that big mouths like me are exposing. They don't want Dave Cartland gobbing off about mRNA being poisonous because, like, cancer's based on it. They've got no antibiotics left to design. All their drugs don't work. They cause loads of side effects, statins, PPIs, benzos, all the rest of it. So they've got all their investments here, and they've got some little jumped up Cornish doctor, ex-doctor, and all of his friends bleating on about how unsafe it is. And, my journey was just seeing little Cornish practice, seeing people coming in saying, "Doc," not me introducing the idea, it was them saying, "Doc, I had the jab yesterday and today X, Y, and Z." And that was their own experience. They had attributed it. And then when you keep seeing that day in, day out, you think, that's when I started digging into it and noticing that all the people with alleged COVID or symptoms of, or tests that said they had this asymptomatic killer, they were the vaccinated. So, they were completely, it didn't work, if you want to believe the tests and the fact that there was COVID. I'm going to leave that on the fence. But yeah, it's just an absolutely crazy period of time for medicine, and I just don't know how to snap those zombies out. There is a chapter in the book called Medical Zombies that we go into that as to, how they manage to live with themselves. But I'll let you read it.
Well, those within, and you referred to an earlier story, 11th of November, and it was the Daily Mail this time. These newspapers now slowly crawling out of the holes that they've been in and giving a little bit of truth. But the headline was, "I was a healthy physician who took the COVID shot. Now I'm paralyzed." I mean, that's just enough to make you think, what is paralyzed people? And then the subline was, "We're the vaccine industry's dirty little secret." It's a very strong headline, going after hitting the vaccine industry, supposedly, the big pharma, saying a doctor is paralyzed. I mean, again, how do you read that? And maybe about any conversations now with people. I mean, I remember Andrew Bridgen used to talk about conversation with MPs, and there's, "Oh yes, I have families that have suffered this, but I can't speak about that." I mean, if you're paralyzed, then surely it's probably time to speak up. But again, how do you read this? People being affected who are in the medical field, and they've taken something I think would make them feel better, healthy, and it's now causing possible irreparable damage.
Well, firstly, obviously in that article, and you see in a lot of these case studies of celebrities or doctors, they always put that prefix in again. Even in that very article, he admits to, losing his ability to walk, from transverse myelitis. But still, there's somewhere in the article, if I remember it correctly, I do post a lot, that he actually, praises and realizes it's a rare thing. In a lot of these things, they acknowledge it. It is rare, and it saved lots of lives. But I'm just a victim of, and a dirty little secret as well. But I think
it's like when you see like maybe deaths from this, but it would have been worse if they hadn't have had it.
Yeah, worse than death. Well, I think my main way of answering that question is look at the vaccine uptake and the staff, NHS staff. They're absolutely, I won't swear, they're disgusted with the vaccine uptake for flu this year, and I'm quite proud of the NHS for those figures. And the same with the COVID uptake. I mean, that's been nosediving forever. I mean, nobody wanted anything more the two. I can't remember the exact dates or points now, but I think after two, everyone realised that A, they didn't work, and B, they were causing carnage in their patient populations. And I think that's what it came down to, a combination of, what they were seeing in their patient cohorts. There's only so many times you can hear, like I did, I think it's a vaccine doctor. I twigged it earlier, but other doctors, even now, you mentioned about conversations, loads of conversations with doctors, and actually the vaccine injured say to me, they mentioned it to their doctors, and they say, just as you just reported, yeah, it probably is, but A, we can't prove it. B, correlation doesn't always equal causation. And C, if I write this in your notes, I'll get sacked before the day's out, kind of thing. So they do know. I know it's a standard triage question now. It's a standard history taking question. If you're a 23-year-old going in clutching your chest 2 weeks after a booster, the A&E doctor will ask you, whether they document it or not, how many have you had. It's a loaded question. Even radiologists contact me and say, we get so many young people in for CTPAs, and we always ask, slyly, how many did you have? Was it Zeneca? And so it is a dirty little secret, to quote that article. It's a dirty little secret that needs to be shouted out by doctors. But unless, I don't know what the incentive would be to get them to speak out, but they all know, as I've quoted, that I don't think there's a nurse doctor worth their salt now. And I just ask them to look themselves in the mirror each day. They put their stethoscope on and their scrubs and their tunic, and they're going in to help people whilst, sweeping a massive crime against humanity under a carpet, an ever-growing carpet. And, then we move on to other things. I mean, it's not just the vaccine, is it? We're seeing this big fat jab push.
Well, yeah, and it's. But again, you said about moving on, and I think, yeah, we talk to people who have been speaking up against this for since the beginning, and they kind of said, we've got other issues, and I agree. There's no shortage of issues that we face as a society, but unless you deal with it and address it, one, you don't get justice for the people who have been damaged and harmed. You don't get justice and punishment against those who've carried it out. And I would want both, 100%. But also then moving forward. And you mentioned about headline from 16th, from Sunday, yesterday. And the headline is weight loss jabs like Ozempic and Mounjaro linked to 170 deaths, including adults in their 20s. And you realize if we haven't learned the lessons of what went before, then this will keep going on. You see the celebrities pushing this. You see, it's the same push of something new. What is it? Robbie Williams going blind? Surely at some point. So how you must sit back and think, if only we address the problems before we're honest, then this would not keep happening.
Yeah, I mean, again, you just follow the money. You said it's the same people doing the same promotion of this, of something that is deleterious to health. I mean, again, I saw it in my practice in the back end. Firstly, everyone wants it. I mean, it really stunned me. In 6 weeks, every day, I could say confidently, I'd see at least 2 people out of 30 patients who want to have the jab, such as the indoctrination. And it's an easy way, according to the press. You take this injection every day, sod the diet, sod the exercise in the gym and all the hard labor, take this jab and you'll shrink. And there's no doubt you do shrink. You've seen with Robbie Williams, he's got what they call a Ozempic face. I mean that respectfully, Robbie, but if something's made you blind, you stop doing it. You don't. But he's even in that coverage at the weekend, he still continues to take it, even though he's blind in one eye. I know, bumped into one of my old friends the other day, just in chance in town, and he's gone blind. He developed Parkinson's after the jabs, progressively so with each one, and just dropped out. I can't see you there, Dave, because I've gone blind in my right eye. He's just, what's going to happen here? But yeah, I mean, catastrophic, these jabs. Yes, there's a small role for them in an add-on therapy in diabetes. Again, if you're going to go down the allopathic model, I tend to treat diabetes slightly differently, but naturopathically looking at diet and exercise, first principles, and looking at nutrition and reducing carbohydrates, etc. But no, there's an easy, quick way made for the narcissist, made for the person who wants to get thin quickly, and they're lapping it up in their droves. And honestly, if you just look at the side effect profile of it, it really does mess with physiology. When you mess with physiology, nature has a way of reversing things. And I think I posted about, there's a lawsuit again talking of blindness, 1800. I think there's a big class action going on in America, 1800 cases of blindness after, and they've been almost causally associated with the Zempic. It's still on the market there. We just need a few more blind folk before we take action. A bit like the vaccine injured for COVID. I just,
Well,
what is that critical point? I meit needs removing from the market now. So do the COVID jabs. Even in our local school, they're spraying the kids with influenza this week. It's just unrelenting. And I wake up some days just thinking, have I woke up on sort of, I don't know if you're old enough to remember You've Been Framed, or maybe what's this film with Jim Carrey, The Truman Show.
yeah.
Just feel like I'm a character in some weird reality show, and somebody's going to jump out and say, this has all just been a joke on you, Dave.
Yes, it would be that would be the best ending, but it may not be true. Or maybe we're both living in the same crazy story. Um, just a last thought on with this. I see in the US there's a lot of questioning now, especially with Bobby Kennedy, in terms of the huge amount of injections that children are given. You think kind of with this fat jab, it's adults who make a decision. It may be an ill-informed decision. They may be misinformed about the benefits, but anyway, they're adults. Then you look at children and the push to jab children, and there's a lot of questioning into whether children, especially babies, need that amount of injections. Is this driven by health or driven by a big pharma industry? There doesn't seem to be any questions here in the UK. Just how do you see that as a British doctor? Would you like to have the questioning they're having in the US, or is it different here? And again, probably we'll see a push for mRNA with children, even bigger concerns. But how do you kind of see that difference of approach now in the US, asking questions here? It's still head in the sand.
We're just praying over here, the awake doctors, that message does come across, But again, we see from the American narrative, sometimes they let slip. You've got Albert Bourla having a little cup of tea with Trump, for example. He's like, what's that about? And he's just had his booster. I don't know if that's true or not, but there was something that came out. What's going on? But yeah, just to mention, popped in my head, it's not just in kids. They're not just going for kids. They're going for kids in utero now. So they're going for the prenatal schedule. So I often get contacted by people saying, I've been offered RSV, COVID, flu, whooping cough in utero now. And I think the reason I mention that point is because what I'm about to say is kind of linked to both kids vaccine and pregnancy. There is no data on certain aspects. I mentioned earlier about the concept of, putting a little bit, it's a bit like, when you're doing, desensitizing somebody from bee stings, you give them a small amount and it just desensitizes them from anaphylaxis. There's nothing wrong with that concept. It's when you start popping in a bit of polysorbate and gelatine, and you got what else? Polyethyl glycol, aluminium hydroxide, and that's a lot of what I do in terms of parents now. They've lost trust because of COVID and the lack of candor and the lack of trust that we talked about. Just ask. This is my tip, really. I'm probably putting myself out of a bit of business here, but you just have to go back to your practitioner. Remember, the burden of proof is on the expert, the doctor, the nurse that wants to press that syringe. They have to convince you of safe and effective. You don't have to convince them of unsafe and defective. So just ask them a question. Say, I've just looked at the ingredients list for my, let's say, MMR, and it's got A, B, and C in it. And I've mentioned some of the chemicals that are in there as preservatives and adjuvants, as they like to call them. And you say, I just want 3 bits of data, if that's okay, if I can trouble you. I'll happily have my little son and daughter vaccinated to your heart's content. If you can just tell me, is there any information on the carcinogenicity, the reproductive toxicity, or the biodistribution of, for example, aluminium hydroxide, and so on and so forth? You will get a very pale, sweaty vaccinator who will literally walk out the room or call you an anti-vaxxer or something ad hominem like that. So yeah, you can't. It's not to be tolerated, this questioning of, the practitioner, the expert, the narcissist. But yeah, you have fun with that question, because that data doesn't exist. Just to ruin the surprise, it doesn't exist. And actually, on the documentation in the inserts, it says we've not done. So if you don't know if this is going to affect my little boy's reproduction in the future, then I'm not going to have it. Thank you very much. My kids haven't had the vaccine for flu for 10 years. Well, my youngest 2 haven't had it at all, and they get their vitamins, and they've not had flu. But when my oldest 2 used to have the flu jab, they got flu the week after. I thought, oh, same with me. When I used to succumb to it, always used to be sick. Always used to be in bed for days afterwards with the flu-like illness. So it didn't really save me any sort of morbidity. So that's where we are. It's a cult at the end of the day. That's how I see it. It's a cult, and it can't be tolerated any form of dissent. And if you do, you will be Wakefielded, Cartlanded, call it what you wish. The new verb for it, but cancelled.
Well, it's good speaking with you, and we've had Andy Wakefield on, I think twice, talking to him, and he's obviously been vindicated with the links between the jabs and autism. But as I say, David, you cannot keep a good man down, and it's good to see the book out. People can read your background, what happened, they can learn from that. Here it is ahead of you there. So there it is. Do no harm. Diaries of a Vaccinated Anti-Vaxxer. Do get it, read it, and I'm sure you want to pass on to friends and family as a gentle "I told you so." Let David tell them he told you so. You don't have to say it personally. But David, thanks you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. It's always good to catch up with you.
No, it's always good as well. Can I just do one last little book plug?
Of course
I've
you
got
can.
I've got another book. So this is a re-release. So it's not a new book per se. It's a diary of poems. It's an anthology. Let's pop it up as well. Just another plug. There we go. A Doctor's Despair. So we've got lots of fellow quote unquote anti-vaxxers that have got together, written some poetry, and it's pretty cutting actually to what's gone on. I've got a few poems called "COVID Cultists," "Blind Obedience," "The Doctor's Despair," so putting it into that sort of cathartic poetry, and that's another good gift idea if you want to wake anyone up. And yeah, thanks for letting me plug it at the end.
Not at all. Poetry that pulls no punches, that goes for the jugular. There you go. Thanks, David, very much for giving your time to our audience. Appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me, Peter. Always a pleasure.